This is the only way to get your college football week started off on the good foot. It's the Kickoff presented by Ram Trucks. Skubie, Mageza, Treavor Scales, and Jackson Arnold fumbled that football. Don't let nobody tell you otherwise. It was unreal as far as the weekend goes. Not only do we have all kinds of officiating, faux pas, if you will, neither here nor there. There is also the biggest news out of the weekend. James Franklin out as head coach. Shocking headline, to say the least. Notification jarred my phone out my pocket. Skubie, what was your initial reaction and the processing afterwards?
Well, I wasn't surprised in the fact that head coaches are like the CEOs of billion-dollar companies that make all the decisions. And there was a large investment put into this team during the offseason where they kept players who were going to go to the NFL, went into the transfer portal, and they went and got Jim Knowles from Ohio State and made him the highest paid defensive coordinator in the entire country. All that invested into this team and all those expectations were high, and the stock was crashing right after their loss against Northwestern. So James Franklin is a guy who makes all these decisions, and he ended up becoming the first head coach in the history of college football point spreads to lose back-to-back games where he was a 20-plus point favorite. This was inexcusable. Fans were chanting, "Fire James, fire James."
Yeah.
He accepted accountability, and he was held accountable.
Yeah, Skubie, it was understandable. It was untenable at that point, right? But I think two things can be true. Yes, those losses were inexcusable. Also, I don't know if this was the measured approach that you needed to take in a new world of college football.
Understand that.
Understanding that this was disastrous as far as where the state of the season goes. But I can rationalize it in the sense of that duty to mitigate clause that's in his contract means a whole lot, because it means that James Franklin has to go out, try to find a gig, and whatever that gig pays him offsets whatever money that Penn State is going to have to pay him, in theory, according to that contract. So, look, the decision you can rationalize if you are an irrational fan at that point. But I understand, look, bottom line nature of this business, but I do think that you got to be careful when you wade into waters of what is out there as opposed to what you had in-house, especially when you're navigating choppy waters of what the new college football space looks like. But let's bring in Max Browne for more on this discussion. I don't need Mad Max. I need Measured Max right about now, Max.
Measured Max?
You know what I mean? Like, just switch up the tone
Mad
just
Max
a little
will be back
bit.
later.
When it comes to what you saw when that James Franklin news broke, what was the initial reaction and then the processing afterwards?
Yeah, see, Measured Max had two of his head coaches fired mid-season when I played, and Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian at USC. So I'm more with Skubie. I was not surprised at all. And I think the talking point or the headline that everyone's latching onto is, hey, over a 15-day span, you went from a top 5 matchup, 1 fourth down stop away from beating Oregon, to then fired 15 days later. To me, I think that's the headline. That's not the total truth, though, because we all know that the chatter around James Franklin not being able to win the big game has been a cloud over this program for, 4 or 5 years. And what's changed this year is not only the expectations going into this season that Skubie talked about, but James Franklin did not lose to teams that he was not supposed to beat, or that he was supposed to beat, excuse me. And so to lose back-to-back weeks to two teams that they weren't Oregon, they were two teams on paper that were in the bottom tier of the Big Ten. That just can't happen. And as an AD, you have to make the decision of, is my head coach's message still getting through to my locker room? And I think the answer now was no. The negative chatter outside the program was too loud, and they had to go a different direction.
So does that then soil the back end of the legacy of one James Franklin? Are we talking that this undoes a lot of what had already been built?
I don't think so. And I've been seeing some of the social media now, some of the social media posts over the past, call it 12 hours, thanking James Franklin. I mean, he is the guy that resurrected a blue blood program to national prominence after tough sanctions. And again, I went to USC during sanctions, and USC is still trying to get to that point. Penn State resurrected, stabilized it after a very tough chapter. I know Bill O'Brien deserves a lot of credit for that, but James Franklin's very much the guy that took him to the next level. To be there for 12 years, that is no small feat. I think you just got to a point now with a new era of college football. You're looking around, it's a jumbo conference. If they want to compete for national titles, really good isn't good enough. It's got to be excellent, and that's what Penn State's chasing.
All right, as we push things forward, the rumor mill is now circulating. So do you have any candidates in mind that could replace James Franklin?
like everyone, I think Kurt Cignetti is the home run, but I actually go someone that's off the radar, and I'm not seeing on a lot of these lists. I go Lane Kiffin, my former head coach, and the reason I go that is because a lot of these names up here, like Matt Campbell, his name's in the running for every job for the past 6 years. Manny Diaz, to me, is the same lane as James Franklin. Dan Mullen, sure, that'd be fine, but if I'm a Penn State fan, do those guys really get me on the bottom rung? Do those guys really get me fired up? I think for the average Penn State fan, those guys are more in the line of James Franklin. Lane Kiffin does not on paper have a top-end SEC job. Is he really going to stay at Ole Miss indefinitely? And what are the jobs that would ultimately get him to move? I think Penn State is one of those where him and his agent have a conversation on the side, because you pair Lane Kiffin's swag, banter, energy, and all the excitement that he brings to college football. Oh, by the way, all the football stuff as well. And you pair that with the blue-collar mentality that's just entrenched inherently in a Penn State program. That could be a very attractive combination there that if I'm a Penn State fan, that would get me fired up.
I don't disagree with the concept of that, but pulling him away from Ole Miss feels like just a gargantuan task, man. It's like that is a program that will fork over whatever is necessary to keep him in those bounds if they want him there. And while I agree, it would be unreal as far as a fit goes. I don't know that Penn State has the gumption, if you will, to be able to pull that off. No?
It's a fair point, and that's the chatter, right? Is that's what happened when Lane Kiffin turned down the Auburn job. Is he looked at his AD and he looked at his boosters and said, "Don't ever tell me no. If we're going after a guy in the portal, I don't ever want to take a back seat to Auburn." Hey, but Skubie said it. Penn State went and got Jim Knowles from Ohio State,
100%.
which that was crazy, and offered top dollar for him. So I don't think it's crazy. And then Penn State, they're paying a $50 million buyout. So I think, Lane Kiffin's buyout that I think is single-digit million of dollars. I have a feeling that donor base could find a way to make it happen.
No doubt. And I'm so glad you brought up that buyout, because that was what everybody was talking about. Outside of like the top 5 to all fall from grace topic, the money is what makes the job, right? Like, they pay you enough to kind of compensate for the pressures that you will inevitably feel. And also, when they send you upon your way, it is expected that you're going to be all right either way. These numbers that are trickling out, and with regards to what it could be for James Franklin going forward, do you see him sitting around for a little bit? Is he going to try to get right back into these coaching ranks?
I don't know if he's going to sprint that fast like Key and Peele. But
that's good. That's really good.
We'll see. I think people forget, because my wife was asking me, like, how did the buyout get that high? Like, that's crazy. But you go back and look at the last 7 years, like Matt Campbell, James Franklin's name had a funny way of popping up when all these head coaching jobs came open. USC, Notre Dame, LSU after Ed Orgeron, who's on the screen there. So to James Franklin's credit, he was in the buzz. Well, maybe that was his agent just doing something. Jimmy Sexton, who represents probably half the head coaches on this list. Right. Maybe he was just doing his job at a high level. But the reason his buyout is that high is because other schools apparently had interest, which speaks again to his legacy and all the success that he did have, James Franklin, that is, at Penn State.
$77.5 million for Jimbo Fisher. He gets nearly 50. Best job is being a fired head coach.
You can make it work one way or another. That oil money was apparently good money. Max Browne, we appreciate it. Don't go nowhere, though, man. We got to holler at you again in just a little bit. We'll have you put the Mad Max cap on in.
See you soon.
Time now for Unstoppable Performances presented by Ram Trucks. And how about a top 10 showdown in the SEC as 5th-ranked Ole Miss heads down to Athens to take on your Georgia Bulldogs, who are ranked 9th in the country. Trev, your dogs have been rolling as of late, winning 2 straight, and now facing a team at the top of the SEC standings. Opening as a touchdown favorite should be a good one, but as we look at the matchup, Trev, given the state of the SEC halfway into the season, what's your assumption?
Look, it's wide open, as one Josh Pate has said. It's what the Big 12 was supposed to be walking into the season before Texas Tech just ran roughshod over everybody. The Georgia team has a little good, bad, and ugly. The good being that they're gritty. They have fought back in a few contests, almost won all 3 of them, losing to Alabama, beating Tennessee, and most recently Auburn. The bad is they can't get the pressure without sending extra bodies. Third worst in pressure percentage when it comes to, or excuse me, second worst in pressure percentage when they don't blitz. Fifth best when they do blitz. The ugly, good Lord, can they start a game on top? Like, it just feels like they're behind every single time they walk out on the field. They are unable to convert offensively on third down, averaging less than 7 yards, air yards per pass attempts, third worst in the SEC. And then defensively, they're giving it up on third down like no other. 48% conversion rate on third down for all of their opponents. So it's just bad start after bad start. So it ties into the good, which is that they're able to battle back. I would just wish that they don't have to battle back on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This has been a problem consistently with Georgia for those bad starts. They start slow, but somehow find their way to get back into the matchup. But yeah, they're battling, right? They're a team that can get back into it. And they're going to go against an Ole Miss team where they should not start slow because they have an explosive offense
100%.
where they can hold you back for the majority of that time. But when you look at that game against Auburn, you said it, that Jackson Arnold fumble completely flipped the ball game because it was down the hill for Auburn from then on. They were 8 of 10 on third down until that fumble happened at the goal line, and then they could not convert a third down for the rest of the game. Now, looking towards your Bulldog and Gunnar Stockton, he had over 200 yards in the game throwing. He's been a guy that can battle back, but he hadn't gotten a touchdown in that game against Ole Miss. I'm not sure if we have an identity yet or know what he offers.
Scubie's fine. He's a gunner. He's a gamer, rather, I should say. It's something that you cannot tangibly account for. Stetson Bennett vibes, where it's just the dude makes the play when it is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
We saw it against Tennessee on that fourth down touchdown to tie things up. We saw it in Auburn with that rush that you just saw around that right side to seal the deal of the game. Gunner is going to wow you with 2 or 3 plays a game. But outside of that, he's going to do what the offense dictates, and that's all that I'm going to ask of him this weekend against Ole Miss. Just let that run game roll. You be a part of it, and you'll be good to go as long as you're able to capitalize on any mistakes that Ole Miss team makes.
The quarterback matchup is fascinating with Gunner because he's going to be going against what is probably one of the best quarterback story in the entire country.
No doubt.
Trinidad Chambliss is a guy who came over from a Division II program, becomes a starter because Austin Simmons got hurt early on in the season, and he's just held on to that position with a death grip as a guy who's not just deadly in the passing game, as you're seeing here, but he can hurt you with his leg. Trinidad Chambliss this week against Washington State, they were struggling.
Yes, they were.
They were down 14 points at halftime, 14-0, but then he was able to put together that run that you just saw. I was pointing at the screen because it's there for me.
That's what you were looking
but he
at.
ran that run, that touchdown in, and then they began to put together a comeback. But they were over a 30-point favorite against Washington State, and they won by 3 points, which, when you talk about slow starts, that's another thing that Ole Miss better clean up as they take on Georgia. Lane Kiffin did say, we read all the press clippings, and I hope that we get in a better mindset going forward. But then the head coach matchup is going to be fun as well. You got Lane Kiffin. You got Kirby Smart.
I mean,
what excites you about that?
I just love the fact that I can lean on Kirby Smart to make the right decisions more often than not than anything. I think Ole Miss has like an unserious vibe, and that can be really fun in some instances. But what you get from Kirby Smart is tried and true. You understand that he is going to maximize the talent that you have, even with the Georgia roster that doesn't necessarily have the talent that they have had in years past. He's a high floor guy, even if the ceiling is relatively low for a roster like Georgia's this season. If you give me the choice between he and Lane Kiffin, I'm going to ride with Kirby, not only because of my Georgia bias, but beyond that, there's a clear difference in discipline when it comes to these two rosters. You're talking about the least penalized team in all of the conference as opposed to the third most penalized team via yardage in the conference. So that in and of itself surmises exactly how I feel about this coaching matchup, in that you know what you're going to get from Kirby, even if it's not going to be top-notch, top-tier talent each week, especially with this roster.
Such a big game for both teams. Ole Miss undefeated coming in. Can Lane Kiffin be able to win this game?
Right.
Maybe the next head coach of Penn State if this all doesn't go well for Lane Kiffin. But we can't wait to catch that game. But we have to ask you guys if you caught some of the things that happened this past weekend. Check it out. Did you catch that? Bama going with Caden Proctor again. Nothing warms my heart than seeing a big man move like a little man.
Dog, I just need him to get into the end zone just one time. One time. I don't know why they didn't go back to him after this, because they ended up kicking a field goal on this drive. Like, go back to the big fella. Let him rock.
And you know they just want to get him in the end zone. But I love how Ryan Grubb, their offensive coordinator, just has a creative way each and every week. And this is great as well. I mean, this ain't North Carolina, but they took their shirt off and waved it around their head like a helicopter.
That's right.
From one guy starting by himself to the whole squad pulling up on him, Trev. This just guys being guys.
Oklahoma State, not a whole lot to cheer about. Glad y'all found something to cheer about, because, buddy, it is dark times over there. You might as well find a way to have some fun with it.
And then the Ivy League people, they just tend to be a lot more smarter than us.
Yeah, hey,
that's why I said it. Yeah, these are your people. What do you say about Cornell putting on third down?
They big-brained it. Like, they got too big for their britches and decided to do something that technically would have outsmarted folks on the back end, but this time it was not working. Harvard wins again, by the way. We're rolling.
Is it a fine for rushing the field? Yes, sir. What is it? 50 what? For rushing the field? Yes, sir. How's it 50,000 for rushing the field? Who made that a rule? Excuse me? Come on, man. That ain't right. I mean, these kids, well, we have 50,000 right there. We can chip in. Let's chip in.
Let's chip in is my favorite part.
That's perfect. He gonna ask the media members, hey, y'all come up about them pockets. Somebody, just start this Venmo account. We'll get it going.
Storming the field is one of the best parts about college football. And the best part about it is, for those who don't know, you get fined each and every time. But it's what makes it fun. Pay the fine. These schools got the money for it.
I said the budget has been accounted for. We're fine. All right, baby, it's Mad Max time here on the Kickoff, presented by Ram Trucks. Max Browne back with us to help us preview this slate of games on Week 8 of the season. Let's begin in the SEC. Tennessee and Alabama. It is Cigar Weekend, third Saturday in October down there. Max, how do both Alabama and Tennessee play out as far as the SEC picture goes for you?
Yeah, they're both firmly in the race, that's for sure. I think Tennessee, of those top-tier teams, yes, you have Ole Miss and A&M as tier one, but that next group of Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, I think, is like the bottom of that grouping there. LSU's obviously in there as well, but this game goes a long way, right? Alabama does have the one blemish versus Florida State, doesn't hurt them in conference play. Feels like the winner of this game very much controls maybe not controls their destiny, but controls their path forward to ultimately getting a place in the SEC championship. I've been impressed with both teams, both quarterbacks who coming into the season, both these guys didn't have tons of hype, but they're both playing at a high level.
Now, speaking of those quarterbacks, which of those two are you liking more as far as their job done this season, Ty Simpson or Joey Aguilar?
I lean Ty Simpson. I've been blown away by his performance, because my take all offseason was that if Jalen Milroe elected to come back to school, that Alabama would have been the preseason #1 team in the country. He did not. He elected to go be a third-round draft pick for the Seahawks. Enter Ty Simpson. He's thrown 16 touchdowns and only 1 pick. Playing at a high level, and it's not just a conservative offensive attack. They are pushing the ball down the field. 3 touchdown passes last week. They're entrusting him not only with just the passing game, but the entire offense. I think he's a very sharp player. He's unlocked the weapons out wide. And ever since that first blemish versus Florida State, this offense has gotten better every single week. And I wouldn't want to play this Alabama passing attack.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it is so fun to watch Alabama every single week, and sticking on the conversations of quarterback is going to be fun to watch a matchup between Vandy and LSU. That is 2 quarterbacks who aren't afraid of the big moment, Brett Nussmeier and Diego Pavia. Does this game favor one or the other in your eyes?
I think it favors Diego Pavia and Vandy. And for one reason alone, LSU can't run the ball. And I don't care how good your quarterback is, if they're going to sit with 2 high safeties the whole game and you can't run, that's tough to put up points. And that's been the Achilles heel last year for LSU. I thought they would address it this year. It hasn't worked out that way. And I've been impressed with Pavia as a passer. I mean, it really have. Last year, it was so much about the run game and the unique offensive scheme. He can throw the ball. Vandy's gritty. Their defense, both from a pass rush standpoint, is top 20 in the Power 4. Their pass game coverage is right there in the middle of the pack as well, so no weakness there. And I think Vandy has enough from a matchup perspective to give them the edge heading into this game versus LSU.
So who do you think needs to win this game more out of the two teams?
I go LSU. I'll go the opposite for that answer, because if LSU loses to Vandy, I mean, you talk about the chatter around, I mean, James Franklin and all that. Like, what does that mean for Brian Kelly as you play that out the rest of the season? I just think if you're LSU, this is a game you can't lose. Again, similar from the expectation standpoint, right? LSU had so much coming back. They had arguably the best quarterback in the country coming back. You know, you lose a tough one to Ole Miss. You have to respond, get back on track, and stay in that SEC title conversation, because they have the roster to do it. I think the pressure is much more on the side of the Tigers. They're the team that needs this win the most.
No question about that. As you look at the Tigers' schedule, they have been through it, have found a way to win, but nonetheless certainly need to win this coming Saturday on ABC against Vanderbilt. Before we let you go, bye weeks are a thing around here in college football. You took yourself a bye week, a very important bye week, I might add, to officiate a wedding. So the prep process for that, was it as intensive as it is for a game as far as a play-by-play / color analyst prep?
It was way more intensive. Are you kidding? I got 150 people there trying to speak all lovey-dovey to my best friend and my wife's best friend as well, which was cool. And he was our college kicker at USC, so I threw in a few kicker jokes that landed, so we got the job done.
The essentials. You get a couple laughs, you get a couple tears if necessary, and you get up out of there. Max Browne, we appreciate you slide through as always, brother. Have a great call this weekend.
Thanks, fellas. See you next week.
All right, baby, let's continue with the weekend slate. Number 2, Miami hosting Louisville on Friday night. It's going to be a big one.
Yeah, this is going to be such a fun game to watch. ACC competition is gearing up. Miami goes to still the number 2 spot. Heather had them at number 1 last week. Can they continue to play well? We'll see.
So Friday night slates have been actually really interesting, but if we move over to Saturday, that tilt between Oklahoma and South Carolina going down on SEC Network. Oklahoma messing around and going to Columbia during Cocktober is a journey.
Cocktober is
That's right.
Crazy.
It's what it is.
John Mateer.
It's fine, right.
It felt like he came back just a little bit too early from his thumb injury. Some of the throws that he made, it's not that his thumb looked bad or his hand looked bad or anything. It just looked like a guy who hasn't played football in a while. So, looking forward to seeing if he's kind of cleaned that up.
Ohio State, will they continue to just do the thing and dominate on a week-to-week basis against Wisconsin out there?
That defense has been lights out. That's really the bread and butter of this football team. Now, that offense hasn't necessarily been challenged as much. They continue to grow every week. You have a freshman quarterback,
no doubt.
And he's getting better and better. This will be a good game to see how much he's improving week by week.
Luke Fickell's name is in conversations in a way that you never want to be around, but I digress because I want to pivot over to Texas at Kentucky. Has Texas figured it out, or was that just a blip on the radar on the positive side in their win in the Red River Shootout?
Well, they figured it out in the second half. It wasn't figured out in the first half, so the question is, can they continue to bring that second half momentum into this game? In the first half, Arch Manning looked like the Arch Manning we had seen for the majority of the season, where they had 6 negative plays.
Let's wrap this thing up with a rivalry tilt. USC, Notre Dame. USC actually coming off of a win in which they outrushed Michigan, which is something that you never would have thought you would say regarding a Trojan team, especially as of late.
Which is a great sign because it says that they're a physical football team and they can enforce their will. I mean, look at the big man rolling right there. Notre Dame needs this win. USC needs this win. All right, let's check out this week's CFP projections from Heather Dinich. Trev, what you liking here, bro?
I'm surprised that Indiana leapfrogged Texas A&M, not because I don't think that they're worthy, but I didn't know that the AP would actually pull the trigger to make sure that they had the number 3 team in the land after a wonderful win over Oregon like they had.
Yeah, it seems like they're finally not minding the name on the helmet or jersey and just looking at what the team's doing on the field. So now let's bring in Heather Dinich into the program like we do every single week. And Heather, one of the things that Trevor just pointed out is Indiana, a great win for them, 3rd in your projections. When you look at them, what's your outlook for the Hoosiers halfway into the season?
Well, the outlook is not just whether they will make the college football playoff, because they appear to absolutely be in the conversation, but they're competing for a top 4 spot, which means a first-round bye. You no longer have to be a conference champion to get one of those first-round byes. Indiana's most difficult games are now behind it. They are projected to win every one of their remaining games. Their toughest game left is probably at Maryland. So the Hoosiers are on a path to meet Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. And if they're undefeated, their lone loss is to the Buckeyes in the Big Ten title game. You can have Ohio State and Indiana in the committee's top 4 on Selection Day.
Now, Heather, I'm not sure that we can just look past UCLA anymore now. Like, they're still on the schedule, too.
Right,
like, it's just, they're playing like a different team altogether. But I digress, because I do want to lock in on Oregon, that team that has now dropped to number 8. But theoretically, you mentioned that it's likely going to be an Ohio State-Indiana Big Ten championship game. What does that do to Oregon in that conference?
Well, Oregon is still trying to get an at-large bid, and look, they could still get into the Big Ten championship game for sure, but that head-to-head result against the Hoosiers is going to haunt them not only in the Big Ten conference standings, but in the selection committee meeting room, because if by chance Indiana doesn't win the Big Ten and lock up a spot as a conference champion, then it's going to be competing with a team like Oregon with one loss for an at-large bid, and this will keep them ahead of the Ducks. But Oregon simply has to worry about running the table and getting themselves one of those at-large bids, and they shouldn't have any problem with that. But when you look at the rest of their schedule, USC is for real. I'm very curious to see how that game against Notre Dame plays out, and a road trip to Washington is not a gimme. Jed Fish in his second season is doing a terrific job. They only have one loss, and it's also to Ohio State.
Yeah, and you mentioned the USC Notre Dame game. That's just one of many great games that we're going to have this weekend. So what's one matchup that you see that would directly impact the CFP rankings?
I'm staying right there, because if the Irish don't win, this is it. Look, they don't have a conference championship game to compensate for a loss, right? So the minute they get a third loss, I mean, you would be in, I would be shocked if a 3-loss Notre Dame team got in, because we're not even sure a 10-2 Notre Dame team is going to get in. If they were to run the table, according to the All-State Playoff Predictor, they'd have a 50% chance of reaching the playoff. And that makes sense to me. I don't always agree with the computers and the numbers, but that sounds about right, because we don't know what other 10-2 teams are going to be out there, how their resumes would stack up. But I'll tell you this about the Irish. It helps that USC is a good team, now ranked, and you can also have Navy, which is undefeated, potentially as a CFP top 25 team. So their resume at the end of the day might look better than we thought a couple of weeks ago.
It's so funny, like Notre Dame's resume being built up by the losses that they took early on, coupled with other teams that may not have been worth a dang at the beginning of the season being built up to this point. But rather than spinning forward, let's look back. The news of the weekend was clearly James Franklin. Him being leaving Penn State, not on his own accord. What was your level of shock regarding that, and the shock waves that could then come afterwards?
You know, it was mixed, because you certainly understand it given what had happened, but it was also stunning, right? Because he has been there for over a decade. He does deserve credit for what he did when he came into that program, and he did more with less. I don't think a lot of people realize how much he had to build that program up. But at the end of the day, Penn State did what it had to do, guys, because they had poured so much money into that program to bring back guys like Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, Andrew Aller, to hire Jim Knowles for $3 million a year. At the end of the day, as hard as this was for Pat Kraft, their athletic director, who's very good friends with James Franklin, they were not getting the return on their investment when it came to winning those big games. This team was built to win a national title.
I mean, that's what I was literally preaching at the beginning of the show, Heather. So I'm glad that we're on the same page here. At the end of the day, don't mess with people's bottom line.
That's it.
We appreciate you increasing our bottom line, Heather, by joining us once again on the Kickoff.
Thanks, guys.
I just think it's fascinating. That fan base is obviously desperate for a national championship, and the conversation will constantly continue regarding that Penn State program and what they can go from here.
Penn State is one of those programs in the country that has to compete every single year. If not now, then when was it going to be? But we appreciate y'all joining us once again for the Kickoff. That's Trev. I'm Skubie. Thanks for watching the Kickoff presented by Ram Trucks.